Hello and welcome to the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative podcast. My name is Rim. I'm an artist, a certified life coach and an NLP practitioner, and the creator of the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative retreats. Passionate about celebrating joy and beauty in the everyday, especially when things are falling apart, I'm insatiably curious about human nature, and I look into the world with reverence, awe, and a sense of wonder. Tune in for stories exploring healing through creativity, art, embracing sensitivity, and navigating the subconscious mind. I'll talk about the struggles that highly sensitive and creative people face, and share my experiences, insights, and favorite tools along the way. I'm here to empower you to turn what we often deem to be a curse into your biggest gift. I believe that the more we create together, the more we heal the world. So let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative podcast. I'm so happy and grateful for you tuning in. This is the second episode where I share my journey across the globe in the world of art and creativity. Today I'll talk about part 2, how I found my way from Paris to London and to Paris again. So I arrived in Paris at age 17, excited. I had been waiting for this time for more than 9 years. I just couldn't believe it. Finally, I was there. My life could finally begin for real. There were a few scares before I managed to get there. My dad had pulled off one of his crazy tricks just before leaving, but thankfully everything worked out eventually, and I made my way there. I flew to Paris and I got a room in a residence for young women at the heart of Paris, in the Ile Saint-Louis, which is really in the center of the Seine River. That was really lucky. It's such an amazing place. And soon enough, I met a group of other young women who were from bicultural backgrounds. They had lived also in different corners of the world. They went to the French International School. So we had kind of similar experience. Of course, we lived in different countries, but overall, we had this habit of being around different cultures. I started design school. It was preparatory year. So we were introduced to different sections, different techniques, graphic design, fashion design, textile design. There was a bit of ceramic, etching, wood cutting. That was really, really cool. And for me, I was like with my big eyes open and being like, hoo, hoo, hoo. So many things to try. That was really a wonderful time. And at the same time, my insecurity grew because I felt like my level was not good enough compared to my classmates. Like back in Tunisia, my level was good and I was the one who was really into arts. But once I was in that school, fashion school, design school, I was surrounded by many, many other kids who had had much more access to that than me. And they were really, like, I felt they're much better than me. And in a way, it was great because then they could push me, to reach a better level. And at the same time, I was feeling insecure. That's also probably because I felt like maybe culturally speaking, of course, we could all speak the same language, but I hadn't grown up there and I felt like I'm missing a lot of things that the youngsters know, like cultural references. But I got used to it. I learned. I love to learn, so I was asking questions. Yeah, maybe that's what annoyed people. I was always asking a lot of questions. And because I like to go deep, so I've always had this aspect when I don't know something, I will ask questions. I really want to understand. I want to know the root and the reason for things. And yeah, I would ask a lot. And I think people thought I'm a little bit of a weirdo. I can understand that. Well, anyway, other than that, it was a great time with this group of international women in my residence. We were exploring Paris, enjoying the ease to be able to go everywhere, to have access to so many diversity. We were in the center of Paris. We could do, as soon as the day got warmer, we would do picnics by the Seine, seeing so many exhibitions, going to parties, happenings. It was really amazing. Like, it was all the freedom and all the exploration I had dreamed of as a teenager that I felt I was lacking of, and finally I felt I'm living life intensely. So that was great. I discovered the pleasures of drinking alcohol. And well, I may have indulged a little bit, maybe a bit too much. I felt like I had missed out on that when I was a teenager in Tunisia, and I felt like I have to, like, make up for the lost time once in Paris, and all of this was easily accessible everywhere. I had nothing, no one to tell me I cannot do anything. It was like pure freedom. So, and I was, of course, still, I was a highly sensitive person, yet, of course, I didn't know that, but I didn't really know how to relate with people. I thought I knew, but deep down, I think I was already shape shifting in a way. And more than that, I think it's the fear to be vulnerable. I would share some stuff, but I wouldn't share deep. Like, I wouldn't share painful stuff. I was really worried that people would find me weak, or that they would pity me or whatever, and I didn't want this. Would be horrible for me. So yeah, numbing my emotions and trying to fit in, and of course enjoying, also experiencing life as a young adult. That's also part of the journey, I think. But getting back to school and education and studies, at the end of the first preparatory year, I failed the entry exam to fashion design. I was so shocked because, as I said in the last episode, I was totally obsessed with that. And it was like I was in a track, I'm going to be a fashion designer and that's it. So I was like, what? I didn't make it to the fashion design class. Why? Like, I didn't make it. So of course it was a blow. It was hard. But I'm so thankful that I didn't make it, because I chose, like, I had the choice. Maybe I try another school, I try a private school or whatever, or I stay in that school, which was and it still is the best school in France, best school in Paris for fashion, for design, for textile. And I do textile, and I thought, wow, I love to dig deep into things. I like to understand the reasons and the meaning of the things I love, like the thing that are interesting to me. So textile is a great way, because in order to make clothes, you need textiles, you need fabrics, and weaving is like the base of textile. So I chose the weaving major, and that's how I was introduced to one of the big loves of my life. I loved weaving. It was amazing. I could stay hours and hours and hours on my loom, forgetting the time, forgetting to eat, forgetting to go to the bathroom. And you probably have experienced such moments like that, when you're so deep into what you're doing, you lose track of time, and that's usually something you enjoy a lot. And it's like, in a way, I was getting lost in my thoughts, but also getting lost in my movements, with my hands moving on the loom. Also the technical part, which I didn't know I was patient. I was always supposed to be impatient. I was impatient actually for so many things, but with the loom, I could spend hours threading the loom, dressing the loom. We have to insert threads, so it's like even not a millimeter, one by one in the needles, and there are hundreds of needles, and you have to be very careful. You need to follow a certain order, and if you make a mistake, then you will have problems when you're weaving, or mistakes that you have to fix. You need to pay attention to the tension of the thread. Otherwise, like if it's too loose, the weaving will not work. It would not be regular. But if it's too tense, if you tighten the threads too much, then the threads might break, so you will have holes in your weaving. So all of these things you need to pay attention to. And surprisingly, I enjoyed that part. So that was really a great time. These 2 years were really a blessing in that way. I really explored the world of textile. I also learned some tapestry techniques, embroidery. I loved my embroidery teacher. He looked like a dandy, and he was so knowledgeable in embroidery and also in art history. I love art history. I've always loved learning about that. I love history anyway, and fashion history. I mean, not art. Art history I like as well, but fashion history even more. Because to me, fashion it's like the embodiment of humans' culture. And it's not only culture, it's like society, culture as a society, the way they behave, the way they live their life, the way they think as well, the dynamics between groups of people. And so that's, yeah, for me, that has always been a very, very interesting topic to dive in. So I enjoyed all of those years exploring textiles, exploring fabrics, exploring textures, volumes, colors, dyeing. I did a lot of dyeing as well. And actually, I did an internship with an artist, a French artist, who had studied in Japan with a master dyer, who taught her very ancestral, ancient traditions, dyeing traditions with plants. And she was looking for students to help her to prepare an exhibition at a museum in Paris, the Jardin des Plantes. It's a kind of plant museum, and it was an exhibition, open air exhibition in the garden. And she taught me some of her techniques, and her atelier was in this picturesque cobble lane near Montmartre. So it was like this picture perfect image of the Parisian artist that we usually have. I mean, yeah, life is not always like that, but I'm so glad I got to experience this for a few weeks. And it reinforced my notion that working with textile was kind of like cooking. And with her, we were cooking. When you dye fabrics, you're in the kitchen, you use the sink, you boil the ingredients, the plants, you prepare some different mixtures. That's, for me, it was like cooking and playing with colors. Not smells as well, actually, scents, yeah, because some plants have very strong very strong odor. And after these 2 years with studying textile, I got in the fashion degree. Finally, I was excited. I had this 2 years before to really dive into textiles, which was a chance because then in fashion I could really express my love and knowledge of fabrics and textures into the clothing I designed. And these 2 years studying fashion were a great time to dive deeper into design concept, the design process, telling a story through a clothing collection. I also learned screen printing, which was amazing. And I think the most important I take from those years, those 5 years, is the idea that one can do anything with very little. The school was a public school. In France, we have public and private and university. For fashion, there is no university. For design and art, it's not like for practical topics, practical subjects. We don't usually go to university. We go to school, and then you have the choice, private or public. We went to that school was public. So you don't need to, it's not expensive, which is a great thing about France. But I mean, the education system is not amazing in France, but for that, it's really a blessing. I'm so grateful for that. I studied 5 years and I didn't pay anything. I had to pay for my material, of course. And yeah, when you study fashion and textile, it is quite expensive because you have to buy so many stuff, supplies. But other than that, nothing. So since I had to buy my own material and supplies, obviously I had to limit myself, and it was the case for many of my classmates. So we had to learn how to be thrifty and how to be resourceful, how to create with very little, let's say. And I think this is a skill that is so useful in life. You don't need to have the best thing and the best tools. You don't need to have the best car. You don't need to have anything in order to do something, to be creative. You can create with very little. And at the same time, it's quite funny. It's a paradox. So in one way, on one side, they were teaching us how to be, like encouraging us to be resourceful, to be very creative and use our imagination to find solutions. And at the same time, there was a kind of pressure and direction to fit to one specific aesthetic, really. It was the aesthetic of the school. L'Esprit Dupéret. My school's name is Dupéret. So I felt like we had to follow a certain style, and if we didn't fit into that style, well, the teachers didn't really appreciate our work. And they would guide us, of course, but I didn't feel always very guided. But in design, there was no problem for me, not much, but it was in art, funnily enough, in art, with my parents being artists. I found out there that I don't draw well. That's what my teacher said, that I don't draw well. And instead of showing me and teaching me how to find my way, they didn't really. It was, I understood it as a condemnation. Like, Rim, you're not talented with drawing. Maybe you should forget about it. Like, there's not really a way. Don't, like, you can try, but... Instead of, I wish they had explained me more or show me some techniques or show me my way, that maybe my way doesn't have to be what we think is pretty, doesn't have to be realistic. And yeah, I wish they had encouraged me to find my voice. And that was not the case. I can understand also that they were busy, they didn't have time probably for that. But yeah, that's the one thing I found was not helpful for a young, sensitive person, who is, I was 20, like I went to that school between 17 and by 17, my 22, so my personality was still forming. I don't think we are finished when we are 17, 18. At least for me, I was not finished. So, yeah, of course, I was lacking of confidence, and I also respond better to positive encouragement, and being told that I don't draw well and not being given tools or direction in how I can draw better was quite something for me. And actually, I didn't draw after that school. I didn't draw for the next 10 to 15 years. And it's so sad because that's the one thing that was keeping me sane when I was a kid. Like, all my childhood and teenagehood, I was drawing. I loved it. And then suddenly I go to art school, to design school, and then it kind of takes this love of drawing away from me. There is another event that marked me very deeply during that time, is a trip to New York. We went there with my school for a school trip. In September, it was a beautiful time of the year, warm, not too warm, but still warm, and it was really a beautiful trip. And we spent a lot of time sketching. We were visiting 2 to 3 museums per day, and sketching. And in a way, it's a great thing. Sketching is such a good way to practice your art while visiting something, to try to understand the inspiration that you're witnessing. But I realized back then, I mean, I was not really aware of that. I thought maybe I'm strange, but I noticed that I'm actually soaking in the vibe or the inspiration more when I'm in the streets, in the parks, than in the museums. In the museums, I love seeing museums, but for me, one per day is enough. After that, it's too overwhelming for me. It's too much. And then I cannot really, I mean, I can still scan for information because my eyes are like a mini computer scanning for inspiration everywhere. But I think it's more this idea, this notion that the culture or the spirit of the city is not only found in museums. I don't think so. And for me, inspiration comes from everywhere, not only art and museums. So yeah, this doing museums all day long and sketching was a bit like killing it for me. A bit heavy, but still, it's I'm grateful. It was an amazing opportunity, and I loved it so much that, in fact, that I wanted to move to New York. I remember I told myself one day I will move to New York City, and I will spend time strolling along. This was the first seed in me thinking that maybe Paris was not all what it was cracked up to be, and maybe there is more for me elsewhere. I love the idea of being a foreigner somewhere and speak a different language. When I was in when I grew up in Tunisia, I was kind of a foreigner. I was the French. But then I stayed there for so long that I was not a foreigner anymore. When I moved to Paris, at the beginning, I was a foreigner, the one who comes from Tunisia. But then after all these years, I became a Parisian. And I think that's also something that I liked, to be the different one who is observing, And so that's also why I think this idea of moving to New York sparked an interest in me. But anyway, we went back to Paris. We finished the school, the year. I graduated. I did my last internship, and I applied to many women's wear companies, and I was not taken in anywhere. I felt okay. Well, it's quite tough. No, I'm not getting what I want. But I got what I needed, which is much better. I got by chance, by coincidence, I got an internship with a menswear designer. I'm so glad I did. That's why I say I got what I needed. And I think that's often like this in life, when you think you want something and then you don't get it. Of course, you're devastated, but then you get something else and it's much better in a different way. You even could not imagine how better it could be. And that's actually what you needed and what you wanted deep down, what was serving. It would serve you more for the next phase of your life. And this is exactly what happened to me. This job in the menswear designer also introduced me to another big love of my life, which is the understanding and appreciating the unseen. Because in menswear, men don't really have so much variety as women, especially at that time. I think now it's changed a little bit, but still, menswear is not so diverse. And the emphasis is on the inside of a garment. The construction of the garment is super important, the cut. And I didn't really know, we didn't learn much about technical stuff in my school. We learned more about the creative side, but the technical, the beauty of the cut, not so much. And I found this is so fascinating. It's like going deep into something you cannot see. You think you cannot see it. Like, when we look at clothes, we just look at clothes, we think we see the outside. But actually the inside conditions the outside a lot. If the cut is not right, if the lining is not properly sewn in, or it's not the right fabric, if the collar is not pressed properly, it would change the shape and the fit of the garment. So therefore it has a huge impact, the choice of the fabric as well. And this is something I'm saying now as I reflect on that time. I was not aware of all of that. I was too young. But I ponder and I think, wow, that's such a good metaphor for life. Because also the unconscious, which is the inner world, our inner world, we don't see it. Often we think it's not that important. What counts is our actions or what we say, what we think, what we consciously think. But actually, this is influenced by the inside, our inner life, our subconscious. And this is what gives, that's what shapes our outside, our outer experiences. I didn't think about this back then. I was not that philosophical. I was just okay. I'm intrigued. I want to learn the inside out, and I did, and that inspired me to move to London, not New York, but London, because London is kind of it is the big city for tailoring. Savile Row, I also loved. I was a big fan of Alexander McQueen, Vivienne Westwood, who were two designers who had brought tailoring into fashion, into the world of fashion, and modernized it. And I was really intrigued by that. I also wanted to improve my English because I could feel within me that connecting with the rest of the world was super important and would be important for me. And I thought, yeah, English is an important language to master. I love it, actually. I love the sound of it. I love English music. Many of my favorite artists were from the UK, so it all made sense for me. I'm moving to London. So at age 22, I packed my stuff. I sold a lot, like I sold many things and a lot of my belongings, and I took a bag and moved to London. I arrived in November, and my first home in London, I laugh because it's not what I was dreaming about. As much as, like, when I moved to Paris, I arrived to this beautiful, picturesque residence in the center of the city, in this beautiful, glamorous area. I had been so lucky. But when I moved to London, I was not that lucky. I arrived in a home just opposite a prison. It was November, really gloomy. I think I arrived in October, just before Halloween. And just by a jail, prison. I was alone. I didn't know anyone. I was an au pair. I moved as an au pair. It seemed quite easier to arrive that way. And my host family was a little bit strange. They were working at night. She was smoking. She was pregnant and smoking. So that was a little bit strange, but well, people do what they want to do, of course, but let's say my values were a little bit different. Things were okay until they were not okay. One day she got mad about some stuff and she kicked me out. She put my bag and she threw it out in the street and she told me, I want to get rid of you. Like good riddance. I was like, I'm alone in London in winter. I don't have a lot of money. I just had, the small au pair salary and I didn't know what to do. But thank God I knew one girl. She lived across London, but she was really nice. She was a student. She smuggled me in her dormitory, in her university. I stayed a few days and well, that was a story because I got sick. It was so cold, and I was out in the street in the rain every day looking for another host family or another solution. And yeah, didn't really have so many, I couldn't stay too long to that friend's place, so it was a bit awkward. But it's amazing because even when you think you're done, like you kicked out in the street. I was kind of homeless really for 4 days, but yeah, I was young, so probably a little bit not realizing the extent of the situation. Um, but I found people to help. There are always people willing to help. So this for me is a very important moment because of that. Yeah, it's a fun anecdote that I can tell. I remember that time I got kicked out in the street in London, but also remember how, even though I didn't know these people well at all, I only met them maybe once or twice. They helped me. They hosted me in their home. They lent me a bed. They paid for food for me because I didn't really have anything. So yeah, that was really, I would say, a very beautiful moment. Like I met like kind of mean people, but also very nice, very kind people at the same time. So a good memory for me. I found a new home. I worked for another family a few months, then another one, and until I realized, okay, au pair is not for me. Uh, I cannot handle it. I'm too worried that something bad will happen to the kids, or if anything is not right, I'm always worried that it's my fault. I felt I'm becoming too paranoid, and it's too stressful for me to think that. And also, I felt like I'm invading these people's space, even though they gave me a room and I kind of work for them. But I felt like I'm an imposter. I should not be there, and I don't feel comfortable. So I decided au pair is not for me. But it was still a nice experience. It was interesting. And by chance, I was looking in a magazine for a job, and I found a job for Sandro, the French brand. They were opening a boutique, the first boutique in London. I got the job, and I moved into a crazy house sharing in Elephant and Castle. If you don't know, Elephant and Castle is kind of a dodgy area in London. It's central, so it's very convenient for transports, but it's not the most peaceful area of London. However, my flatmates were from all over the world, so that was also an interesting experience. I spent 1 year in a few different homes in that area, working at Sandro, and honestly, I was kind of drifting away, and I didn't feel very well in my head because I thought I'm actually drifting away. I'm earning a salary so I can get by. I can, I improve my English. That's great. But what about my dreams to be a fashion designer? Yes, I'm working in fashion, but I'm in a shop. But that being said, it was such a chance because the manager, the boss of that company, she was so thorough and particular that she really taught me how to speak English, to learn, and how to explain benefits and features, how to understand what women want with clothes, and what they like and how they need to be helped, how they lack confidence in their body, and how we can find a way around that, and how we can help them to feel more confident, more beautiful. I enjoy that aspect. It really helped me for what I did later. In a way, it was also another occasion to understand clothing. When I was studying, I learned about the concept, the design. Then I learned about the weaving, how to weave the clothes, and then tailoring. And then here I was learning like how to put together the final product on a real woman's body, and how to make it fit into her life, her lifestyle, her desires, her wishes. That was very interesting. Until the company was bankrupted, and I'm so thankful for that. Maybe otherwise I would have stayed because it's comfort. I have a job, I have salary, I know everything there. My colleagues and I work well together. But thankfully, I mean, not for them, but for me, I got made redundant, and that was the push I needed to go back to design. And I found work at Alexander McQueen, and while that was a big dream of mine, it was like, oh my god, McQueen. Well, creatively speaking, it has been an interesting experience, but humanly speaking, it was very disappointing. And that has been the experience I would have all the following years in the world of fashion. There is a lot of psychological pressure, a lot of pressure to work a lot. When I say a lot, it's a lot. It's like 12 hours per day or more, starting very early, finishing very late, like midnight, 1 a.m. And often it was really far from my place. I had to take to commute 1 hour one way, 1 hour the other way. Very little paid. Actually, if I was paid, I was lucky. So I had to have part-time job. It was the case for everyone. I mean, if we don't have rich parents to support us, then we had to have part-time jobs, and so that we could work what we wanted to do. We wanted to, like you have to, in a way, you have to pay to have the job you want, which is kind of crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And also, not being given guidance. They expected us to know everything already, to be already super perfect at work. And I'm sorry, but when you start work, when you're a young graduate, you have skills, you have knowledge, you have ideas, but of course you need to be trained and you need a little bit of time to get into the work. And there was so much pressure, and the common saying was, well, if you're not happy, you can just go, because there are 20, 30, 50 people waiting for this job, so I don't care about you. And another thing was another kind of pressure. It was like, well, if you work hard enough and you slave away enough for a few years, then maybe you'll be promoted. And I saw many people, who had these carrots dangling in front of them, and they were still hoping that they would get promoted. But after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, nothing. But they still believed in it. Good for them. Good for them. For me, I felt this injustice is too strong, and I cannot stand by it. I don't appreciate being treated like that and being taken advantage of. I don't think I'm learning enough also. Yes, I'm still learning how to be resourceful, because nobody is telling me what to do or showing me what to do. But there was this also, I forgot to say, rivalry and jealousy. So those who had been promoted would kind of shy away to show us, the newbies, what to do or how to do, because they would be worried we would do better than them and then take their job. I think the great thing about being an HSP is that we, as an HSP, often we don't like, I say we because that's a common trait we can find amongst HSPs, is this dislike of unfairness, this need for justice, and of course a very strong sensitivity to unhappiness, to the dark things in life, really. And this was really, for me, I thought this is really a dark behavior. I mean, these people are really treating others really badly. I cannot accept that, and I cannot shut my mouth. I cannot accept they will treat me like this. I also wish people wouldn't treat others like that. And I remember I was trying to say, no, are you sure this is legal? Are they allowed to treat people like this? And I felt like, okay, you're doing your French, you want to do the revolution. The message I got was, well, I'm doing too big a deal for nothing. And that's how it is. We don't have the choice. That's how life is. That's a message I heard a lot, and I was like, really? Is it really true? I cannot believe it. I don't want to believe it. No, it's too horrible. It's too mean. It's too cruel. I mean, we're supposed to do something we love. This fashion, it's supposed to be... I thought doing something we love would make people happy. I thought being creative, being surrounded by beauty would make people happy and grateful and kind and respectful to others, but I was wrong. That was not the case. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna take a break and go back to study, so at least I would learn more, and maybe once I study more, I would get paid more. I would be respected. I thought at that time I thought, okay, maybe I don't have enough degrees, maybe I'm not enough. Maybe that's the reason. And well, I think many of us think that, and that's a lie. That's not true. Although learning more sometimes is can be very useful, and I don't regret. I studied again. I went back to university in the UK, got that experience. I enrolled at London College of Fashion to study tailoring, and then at Central St. Martin's to study pattern cutting. So it was like rounding up my tour of the world of clothing. I can say I really learned kind of all aspects of it. And it was great. It was great. It really taught me more discipline, um, to be more meticulous, to be more precise in what I was doing, to have more technique. I think it's important. Creativity is great. I don't think technique is everything, but it can help to build some confidence. It's also at that time that I learned the importance of hard work. Not hard work as in working a lot, also, yes, but I've always, when I do something that I love, I've always been the one who would go all in. When I don't like something, then it's really difficult to motivate me. But when I'm interested, I can really lose myself in it. But when I say doing the hard work, it's like doing the things that are kind of boring but essential. You have to do it. So, for example, if you want to design a beautiful garment and be very creative in your idea of a fashion collection, for example, well, if you don't know how clothes are constructed and are made, you don't understand the direction of the fabric or how the fabric will fall and its properties, and you don't understand sewing, the construction, that's super important as well. All of these details, and I think this is applied, you can apply to many other things in life, but that was that experience for me, to be patient and spend the time to practice, understand, and master the things that are a bit more, that are less fun, and how to find fun in this less fun thing. This thing that a few years ago I found boring. So this was really important. And at the same time, I think this was a way for me to go overboard, and I pushed my attention to detail too much. And that's something highly sensitive people also tend to do, because we don't, like, a trait of the highly sensitive people is not to make a lot of difference between things that come into our brain. We perceive everything. There's a lot of information we take in, and sometimes it's hard to sort it out. And we notice all the subtleties. Like, we can notice little details that other people might not see or might not pay attention to. And for me, that work of being very precise, very detail oriented, in a way, it would kind of, maybe it was easier for me to do that. But at the same time, I think it exaggerated that side of me. I became very nitpicky, like really, really nitpicky, and that's not healthy. And it's it can be a source of pain and sorrow, really, especially because you feel like you can never do enough. You're always finding fault in things, and also in people and your relationships. It becomes really exhausting. And I think it's a way to control stuff. For me, that was the case. Probably a way for me to manage my emotion. Of course, there were other things that didn't go necessarily as I wanted in my life. For example, my romantic relationships. I was not super thrilled by it. And I think this focusing my attention to the little details was a way for me to exert control. and I was not very grounded. So I think it was also a way for me to deal with my anxiety. Um, Being very nitpicky and control the garment, control the cut, would give me a sense of power and at the same time an escape. Anyway, I enjoyed that time. After that, I worked as a freelancer. I went back to the to the workforce. I thought with my 2 extra degrees, then it's gonna be much easier to find better work and better paid, more respected, maybe more responsibilities, and maybe I will finally be guided and learn and find mentors and start my really start my career, like start it properly. And no, that was not the case. I found work as a freelancer, and the experience was really devastating for me. Really, that's the word. I tried really hard. I was very motivated, very eager to prove myself, to be good, to work hard, to contribute. And I found designers who were very abusive, very toxic. They were struggling themselves, I think, at the end. I think they were very struggling. Maybe some were using. There was probably a bit of drug addictions. I didn't at all, but I suspect some of them had. And I think they were not very healthy in the head, probably not physically either. And I got really frustrated by that, and I thought, that's not reliable. That's not reliable work. I need to find, even though I'm learning a few things here and there, it felt like it's always a stop and start and stop, start and stop, stop and start. It's not reliable. So I need to find something that I can control, that I can do for myself, and that is mine, and that not people cannot take away from me. And I also wanted something creative, because working like that for other people was not so creative. I kind of miss those days where it was just exploring, making stuff, experimenting. There was no room for experiment at work, so I had to work super fast, and I could not fail. If I made one little mistake, I would be fired, or if not fired, threatened not to be paid, or it was like that, kind of not great when you're super anxious. I remember even going to a job interview with a very famous designer, very trendy at the time, and she smoked in my face during the interview. So one day, I just after the collections, I had finished my last contract. I started to make stuff at home for fun, and I had just discovered the world of bloggings. It was the early days. Not so early, but still early enough that, it was not so well spread. I had never heard of it before. So I think it was 2008, 2009. I made a few things and I posted it online on Etsy. It was also Etsy's early days. And a few days later, I sold it. I had made a little purse. I sold it. I was like, wow, so cool. So, okay, I made another one and then another one. I sold them and then a few more and then I sold them. So I thought, okay, maybe there is potential for a brand, for a line. So I did it just like that. It seemed, of course, I had practiced and learned about um, doing things and putting yourself forward and all of that, but I never thought this would be it. I didn't intend on having my own brand, at least not in that way. And so, because it was Etsy, it was all about homemade and, you know, the, something that is close to the community, not made in those nameless, soulless factories. I was making everything myself. I used my love of fabrics and my love of style, and I combined them together to make those vintage style little purses using reclaimed fabrics. I thought by then I had begun to realize that fashion was quite polluting. It was the early days, of the awareness. So for me, it was like that would be important. There is a lot of waste. I'm gonna use my vintage fabrics that I have. I have a collection of vintage fabric or like end of rolls, end of remnants, fabric remnants, and I'm gonna give them a new life, and they're gonna be beautiful little purses. And I created that, and it kind of worked. It was working well, and until I made enough money that I could pay for a photographer. We did the first photo shoot, and I loved that. I discovered that world, and I thought that's so interesting. It's like telling a story through images and branding as well, fashion marketing, the online marketing world, branding, telling a story through branding. I remember I was having fun giving names to my products and telling, like imagining that if they had an identity, who would it be? What would be their personality? It was really fun. And it was working very well. I I got featured in some influential blogs at the time, like Ojoy and Daily Candy. That brought me a lot of business. And then I was the featured seller on Etsy. So suddenly I was selling a lot, and so I could develop my business, I could quit my part-time jobs. And I thought that was it, that I found my path. That's my dream, that the dream I always had to be a fashion designer. I have my brand now. I was really enjoying it. I found a seamstress to help me develop the products. And by then, I had just turned 29. And at the same time, I was growing wary of London. I knew London inside out. And I could feel that I needed a change. I felt like, okay, I think I've seen what I have to see and I've experienced what I have to experience in London. In Insight, I can see that this need of creativity and experiencing, exploring, discovering had really propelled me to realize that I needed more, that I needed better. I didn't know that at that time, but that's how I see it. Like when I was, for example, when I was working in that fashion world and I was disappointed and felt frustrated, I know they were like this situation was kind of forcing me to make myself small by the behavior, by the way we were treated, by our options. And this perception that I had that I think there's more out of life. I deserve more, I can do more, I have more potential. It's when I came back to creativity, to trying, to having fun, to doing something I enjoyed with my hands, and you using textures and colors. That's how it propelled me to the next level. And I started my fashion brand, and it worked very well. And by then, and then again, I was falling back into that cycle of, well, it's not so creative anymore. I mean, the brand was, but I had to do a lot of customer service work, a lot of business work, business related stuff, which initially I enjoyed when it was new. I realized actually I don't have time to create new designs so often. And in my personal life, it was not so fun. I didn't feel joy. I was not lit up. So while I was in that creative phase of starting my business, it was okay because I could find solace in that. I could find joy in that. But as soon as this was kind of fading, the novelty was fading, I could see like I had to face that the rest of my life was not lighting me up. And it's for many reasons. It's not only it's not that it's my partner's fault. We were just different. We had different values, different personalities. He's not an artist, very kind person, very smiley person, but not like we didn't have the same vision of life. He wanted safety more than exploration. And I know my soul, I needed more. And at the same time, I was feeling a lot of shadow for that. I could not put my finger on it. I didn't really know what I needed, but I could just feel this discomfort, dissatisfaction. And I turned 29, and like I could feel this voice with me telling me there's no way I'm gonna stay in this situation when I'm 30. No, 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 no. I still didn't know I was a highly sensitive person. I was just being told that I was too emotional, that I was taking things too personally and too intensely. But we still don't know. I really thought maybe there's really something wrong with me. Maybe I'm really broken because my partner was not so sensitive. The one thing I found to stay sane and bring back a sense of strength, also control, is I began to spend much more time in nature. We had moved to green area, like a green suburb of London. I was living in East Dulwich. I remember a very nice area, close to a big park, Dulwich Park, and I would go and walk there every day. And I think it's this proximity to nature that gave me the strength to take the decision to leave, that it was time to move on to a next chapter. And so, a few months after I turned 29, I packed my stuff and I moved to Paris. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if it has inspired you, please share it around you. Also, if you feel called to it, please subscribe to the podcast and leave me a review. It really helps to spread the word out. All your questions are welcome. You can send them to me on Instagram at rim.creativenergy.com or email me via my website, rimcreativenergy.com. And don't worry, I'll share in the show notes exactly where to find me. Until next time, sending you loving creative energy.